to Stacktastic, the weekly web show for the avid comic book reader and those who aspire to become so. Now, it looks like for his 75th anniversary, DC Comics is giving Superman the gift of relevancy. Yes, suddenly the Man of Steel, and really for the first time, is cool. Of course, that's partially because yet another dynamic duo has come to Superman's aid at the movies, but also on the page. That's right, just like he's got two dads, Superman has also got two Snyders. And while you've heard my thoughts on Zack's work, today I'm going to give you my thoughts on Scott's work with the review of Superman Unchained #1. Plus, as always, my recommendations of what comics to pick up or download this week. Let's get started. It's a hard truth for any comic book writer, including myself, that what's really going to move a title off the shelf is the art. And nobody moves comic books quite like Jim Lee. Like Mickey Mouse, DC is wise to use him sparingly for big events like Hush, All-Star Batman, and of course flagship title Justice League when it rebooted along with the rest of the New 52. But what hooks a reader and keeps them interested in a title is the writing, and that's where Scott Snyder has really come to shine for DC Comics. Now sure, there are plenty of writers in comics that can boast writing numerous titles simultaneously, but as I've noted before, Snyder is unique in that he's well on his way to achieving Morrison and Moore level status surprisingly early in his career. As a matter of fact, he only started writing comics in 2009 and made his first big splash in 2010 with American Vampire for Vertigo, where Stephen King initially co-wrote the title. That was a very clever move by Snyder, which gave the title and him a front-of-the-line pass on readers' radar. After American Vampire won both the Eisner and Harvey Awards for Best New Series, DC Comics smartly signed him to an exclusive and put him to work on Detective Comics. And the rest, as they say, is history. In just 2 years' time, Snyder, along with artist Greg Capullo, has made Batman DC's flagship title, easily outshining Justice League, and earned him a Christopher Nolan level of reverence from comic book fans. So that made him an obvious choice for DC's new Superman title, but let's not pretend it isn't a risky move. After all, none of the initial New 52 Superman titles have clicked with readers, and one's even written by Grant Morrison. So, has DC's gamble paid off? Well, right off the bat, it got me to pick up a Superman title, which I haven't done in about a year after giving up on those other Superman titles I just mentioned. And I have to say I was happy to see a greater emphasis on Clark Kent Reporter and Lex Luthor Dark Genius, elements in the Superman mythos that you all know I'm quite fond of. I also found the depiction of Clark and Lois to be delightfully inspired by Reeve and Kidder, although appropriately updated to our modern times. Loved the addition of Lois's Tony Stark-esque editorial tools. We also had General Lane show up, and I loved the last page reveal, which promises something we haven't seen before. But speaking of things we haven't seen before, I saw a bunch of them last Tuesday night when I went to the Man of Steel press screening. And as I said in my review, while I had problems with the storytelling in the film, I was quite fascinated by its ideas, as well as the sci-fi, more alien-oriented approach it took to Big Blue. So when I purchased Superman Unchained the very next day, those ideas were still swimming in my head, yet nowhere to be found in this comic book. That means Warner Brothers and DC are still not putting forward a definitive version of Superman. In all fairness, though, I doubt Snyder was allowed to read the script or see the film as he crafted his own tale. From what I hear, Warner Brothers has little respect for the talent at DC, freezing them out when it comes to the creative process of creating the DC cinematic universe. Which is a real shame because while I think David Goyer doesn't know how to tell a story, Snyder does. From character development to a balance of tone between seriousness and fun to a multitude of layers. Few comic book writers are clever enough to tie in a historical reference like the US dropping the atomic bomb on Nagasaki as subtly yet also as integrally as Snyder does here. Therefore, bottom line is while I'm interested in both versions of Superman, I wish Warner Brothers and DC would stop dividing my attention. So after Superman's big week, this week we have an opportunity to turn our attention to some lesser-known characters. Over at DC, Animal Man starts a new story arc as Buddy Baker is forced to deal with recent tragic events, while at the same time a new villain is revealed. Jeff Lemire is the indie yin to Snyder's more mainstream yang, and together they are DC's intellectual duo. Both got their start at Vertigo, and speaking of Vertigo, a new 100 Bullets miniseries debuts this week. Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Rizzo reteamed for Brother Lano, who now finds himself in Mexico. Then in Marvel's Ultimate Universe, Cloak and Dagger make their debut, as well as Power Pack? Brian Michael Bendis might not have Snyder's cachet, but he writes the hell out of teenagers and this title. Finally, it's a big week for IDW as they debut two hot titles. One is Wild Blue Yonder, where a polluted Earth has forced mankind to take to the skies permanently. And don't let that cover fool you. This story takes place in the future. What's with the 1940s homage then? Guess we'll have to read it to find out. The second title is X-Files Season 10. Yes, just as Buffy and Smallville have continued on the page, now so do Mulder and Scully. Will you return to the series, or has it just been too long? And that's this week's Stacktastic. I'm Grace Randolph for Think About the Ink. I hope to see you back on Friday for Between the Pages. Until then, happy reading.